Anytime.
Hey, everybody, this is Harvey Sluggo Wasserman back with you for the 135th Green Grassroots Emergency Election Protection Coalition. We talk here every week, every Monday, except for holidays, on issues of election protection and of the environment. We've got a full boat for you today. We are going to talk about an amazing group. They've been on about a year or so ago, called Abolish Medical Debt with Jerry Ashton, and they abolish medical debt. They actually pay off people's medical debt, and it's really a very, very successful and amazing organization. So we're happy to talk about them with them today, and now we're going to start off with that. We are going to talk with Wendy Lederman, who's in the heart of America's #1 fascist state, Florida, where democracy goes to die. We're going to hear the latest about Ron DeSantis, especially the astonishing revelations that he was actually a torturer at Guantanamo. He participated in actual torture, as now being revealed by people who suffered through it at his hands. We're going to talk a bit about Zooey Zephyr. I did not hear from her. I had hoped to have her on, but I did list her name because we do want to, her name or them. I'm not sure what her pronouns are, but she's a member of the Montana legislature who's been censored, and I want to discuss her case, and hopefully she'll join us on a future call. Wendy also has a report on Cop City, the incredible fight in Atlanta to preserve the forests there. Then in the second hour, we're going to be joined by Charlie Komanoff, who's a major energy economist who has an article in the recent Nation magazine on the energy consumption involved with Bitcoin, which is actually a very big deal. And we also are going to be talking to Kevin Camps of the Beyond Nuclear organization, who's going to talk to us about a nuclear reactor, an infamous nuclear reactor near Toledo, Ohio, as opposed to Toledo, Spain, the Davis-Besse reactor, which is actually sinking, physically sinking. This is the second reactor I know of that's happened to. There was a reactor that thankfully had not yet gone online in Midland, Michigan, which was sinking, and they finally they stopped it. It didn't get finished, but Davis-Besse has been operating for more than 40 years. It's just sinking into the ground. What can I tell you? So we will get to all that in a few minutes, but we like organizations that actually accomplish tangible victories. And also, I want to mention very quickly, Rob Call is on with us the first time. Rob is the editor and publisher of a truly great website, Op-Ed News. And Rob, if you'll put the links in the chat and maybe just say hi to us so we can hear your voice. You are a legend in the world of internet publishing, and it's really an honor to have you on. So this is Rob Call. Thank you for, I've asked to unmute. Can we unmute you here, Rob? No, there we go.
You got me?
Rob, say hi.
Hi. So Marta Steele, who's one of the senior editors at Op-Ed News, is a regular visiting here. So she invited me and told me about it and how much she enjoyed it. So I'm here to see what you guys are up to. And it's
good. Well,
so much for your kind words. It's to labor love.
It is indeed. Well, as the great A.J. Musty described what it is to have a life as an activist, he said the pay's no good, but the work is steady. So we all know that to be true. But I argue that the pay is great because you get up every day, you do something you love, you work with great people, and at night you know that you made it a better world. So how can you have better pay than that?
Yeah.
Okay, Rob,
so I got one thing I was hoping I'd hear some discussion about. And a poll came out in the last week showing that 80% of Democrats don't want Biden to be the candidate for president. And I'm just curious what the folks are thinking about. I know I sure don't want Biden as the next president. And
we can get to that later if we can. Let's let Jerry Ashton speak his piece, because once we start talking about that, the question is, if not Biden, who? I mean, I'm for Bruce Springsteen, but I don't think that's going to happen. We have actually discussed. My buddy Dave Saltman is on the line here. He's on the show, and he has advocated that Michelle Obama run, but and I think she'd win actually. But I saw her on. I never thought I'd do this, but she's so charismatic, Michelle. I saw her on for a full, I don't know, hour and a half with Oprah. And normally I wouldn't watch, but I turned it on. I really couldn't turn her off. I mean, she is really something else. But at the end, she made it very, very clear that she does not want to run.
Yeah, and
so what can I tell you?
Just as neoliberal as her husband, too.
Well, hopefully a little better, but we'll we'll see. But
so I'll
that.
throw my crazy, silly one out that people can laugh at. When I see Jon Stewart talking politics, he's brilliant. He's deeply informed. He's smart. He's articulate. I would love to see him debate any Republican candidate.
Well, I would too.
Zelensky, who's a comedian.
As a president or a candidate, he's got 2 strikes against him. He's Jewish and he's short. So, in the 20th century,
it's true.
And this is a historical fact.
Really, the short
20th
part.
century, every candidate who was the taller candidate won. And Jon Stewart looks to me about 5'6", 5'7". So I don't know. Anyway, we'll do Lynn Feinerman, and then we're going to go to Jerry Ashton, and then we'll come back to this. We need to discuss this further. Okay, thanks for bringing that up, Rob. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Lynn Feinerman, you had a hand, and then we're going to go to Jerry.
Yes, thank you. I would say to Rob Call that we need to focus on finding somebody who has a different vision of foreign policy. We have had so many Democrats and Republicans who come from the Council on Foreign Relations. It is the same blank every time. We get these neo whatever they are, and they either foment wars or they keep wars going. So I think that if we're going to choose somebody, we really need to not say, oh, well, if they're good domestic, I guess we can live with them foreign-wise. No, there's no difference now. There's no division.
Right. I will point out that both Marianne Williamson and Bobby Kennedy Jr. Have different foreign policies. And by the way, Marianne Williamson will join us in person at the end of the month. I think it's May 29th or May 30th. The last Saturday of May, we will have Marianne Williamson with her. I've known her for many, many years. I have to say, in due humility, that 2 of my books, one on Solartopia, A Green-Powered Earth, was introduced by Bobby Kennedy, and one called A Glimpse of the Big Light, about the passing of my parents, was introduced by Marianne Williamson. So I have talked to Dennis Kucinich, who's going to be Bobby's campaign manager, about having Bobby on the campaign, on the call. I don't know. I probably can get Dennis on the call, but we definitely have Marianne lined up. I had dinner with her in New York last week, and she's great. And she and Bobby both have different foreign policies. I will guarantee you that. So, and thank you, Lynn. We'll come back to this. Let's give Jerry his time here. Jerry Ashton, are you unmuted? Let's see. There you are. Okay, I asked to unmute. And it's great to have everybody on. We have 46 people with us to start. I want to welcome my listeners at Progressive Radio Network, who will be with us Thursday night. We do this every week. We rebroadcast the Thursday night on PRN, Progressive Radio Network, at 5 p.m. Eastern Time in New York City, but it's podcast. I also want to welcome my old buddy, Charlie Komanoff. Charlie, it's good to see you. Can you hear me, Charlie? Wave your hand. Charlie Komanoff, Charles Komanoff, can you see me? Can you hear me? Apparently not. All right, well, let's see if he comes with us. Jerry Ashton, go ahead, please. Introduce yourself, your organization, what you can do. If you can give us 5 to 10 minutes on your project, and we'll get questions and we can celebrate your accomplishments.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Jerry Ashton. I have an apartment in the city. I live in Connecticut, where I'm talking to you from. I had a very long career as a bill collector, accounts receivable controls, we called it, and had a successful career, sort of semi-retired around 2000 or so. And then along came something called Occupy Wall Street. Being a former Navy journalist, I had a pen and I had a camera, so I decided to catch a subway. They're on a few stops from where I live in the city, Zuccotti Park. So I went down to Zuccotti Park, prepared to chronicle what was happening. And as I started joining different active groups, and what they had to say began to resonate with me. Certainly, there were enough wrongs that Occupy Wall Street was bringing to people's attention in a unique fashion that had never been done quite in that fashion. So here I am, a bill collector, Wall Street's enforcer, in the middle of a bunch of occupiers, and they discovered that there's a bill collector in their midst. And the reason they did is because whenever someone would start complaining about a bill collector chasing them, I'd be more than happy to give them some advice. In some cases, students would talk to me about their student loan debt. I'd give them some advice on that. So I was summoned to a meeting at the new college, and around the table were a bunch of folks, academics, business people, students, and they said, we know a little bit about you. They obviously checked me out. I know a little bit about you, and I believe that you might be able to help us with what we're doing. And I said, well, exactly what is it you're doing? And they said, what we're going to do is we're going to go out and create a 501c4, and then we're going to get money, and then we're going to go to the debt market where medical debt is bought and sold for pennies or less. And we're going to buy $1 million worth of medical debt, and then we're going to abolish it. And I said, well, that's interesting. I'm afraid, however, it's going to be seen by a lot of people mostly as a gesture, because $1 million worth of medical debt in my world is a rounding error. And they said, well, let's look at it through our eyes. We don't believe that in any civilized nation, certainly as wealthy as we are, should allow someone to go bankrupt, to lose their home, just because they got sick or because they got injured. I said, well, yeah, I got that. And a rounding error for you is news. To be able to go to an operation like that and buy medical debt and then abolish it. So we're looking to get the word out. As a Navy journalist, I couldn't argue that either. And they said, and in your case, if your medical debt had been in the $1 million that we would have abolished, would you have considered that to be a casual thing? And I said, what would you like me to do? And that's when I joined Occupy Wall Street with the Rolling Jubilee. That was the name of the charity. I brought a friend of mine, Craig Antico, who used to work with me in the industry, and he had connections in the debt buying world. So we became the back office for Occupy. Nobody knew about us. Our job was to do all the work. They would raise the money. We would go to the debt market, we'd buy it, they'd forgive it. And that worked out very well for a little while, a couple of years, year and a half or so. And then Zuccotti was closed off, Occupy began to dissipate, and the Rolling Jubilee came up to us and said, we're going to go in another direction. And that, by the way, is student debt. So Craig and I looked at each other and we said, we can't let this happen. We read the letters. We knew what was happening out there. We saw how medical debt off of people's backs gave them a new life. Somebody actually cared enough. So we started RIP, that's rest in peace, medical debt, January of 2014, with the intention of abolishing $1 billion worth of medical debt. Now, we didn't have two nickels to rub together, but that was a pretty good idea. We had to have a pretty exciting goal in order to make this thing exciting for us. So indeed, we became a charity, and we starved to death for the first 2 years. Painful. But then a miracle happened. Someone by the name of John Oliver, I'm sure you know him.
Yeah.
John Oliver decided he was going to pull a trick on Oprah, and he was going to give away more than she gave away. She gave away $7 million worth of cars. He said, I'll give away $15 million worth of medical debt. And his crew had gone out and researched it, and they made up a collection agency on the internet, and they were approached by debt buyers. They paid $60,000 of HBO's money to buy that debt. And then the attorney said, what are you doing? You can't go for giving medical debt as a comedian. And so basically he was forced into searching for some other alternative way to be able to out Oprah. And fortunately for him, long story, but we ended up in the offices of HBO, and we said what we do and how we do it. We had all the credentials. And so we agreed to take that burden of abolishing medical debt from their backs. And as a 501c3, we could abolish it with no tax consequences to the recipient. Well, that was fun. And we worked out some other deals so we could afford to send out the letters of forgiveness as well. And so that evening, 2 weeks later, when he had the big show and he announced the fact he was going to be the new queen of daytime TV, and he says, I'm going to give away $15 million of medical debt. Our logo appears before his shoulders, above his shoulders. Wow. And then he goes over to big red button, hits the big red button, money comes down through the ceiling.
Oh, I remember that.
And our website crashes. That's called awareness. And that's when I got the first realization that if anything's going to be able to succeed, they got to know it exists. If they don't know,
so Jerry, can you put your links in the chat?
What's that?
Will you put your links in the chat?
Oh, sure, happily.
And let me ask you a question.
Sure.
How much money have you raised, and how much medical debt have you retired?
Well, I want you to know I failed miserably at the 1 billion. Most recently, our numbers are $8.5 billion.
What?
8.5 billion with a B dollars. And that's for 5.4 million Americans across the continent and Alaska.
You raised $8.5 billion?
No, we didn't raise 8.5 billion. We abolished 8.5 billion, because when you buy debt, it's a penny on the dollar. $10,000, if you come to my organization now, let's rethink this, or to RIP, and you work with me, I can buy $1 million of medical debt for 10 grand and abolish it in your name.
How do you choose whose medical debt you abolish?
You don't choose individuals. What happens is that medical debt is bought and sold on the market in parcels, bundles, usually millions at a time. As I said, $10,000, that's $1 million worth of some hospital's debt. So when we buy millions of dollars at a time, we buy a portfolio. We don't know who's in it. There's no special dispensation. We just do our job. We buy that debt. We go through it and we look for people that are 4 times the poverty level or below. We look for people that are in extreme financial difficulty. And then by algorithms, we just say, congratulations. And a letter goes out and says, you know that $15,422.82 bill that you owe Providence Hospital? It's gone.
Wow. So, but you don't, do you personally know who wins the lottery here? Only afterwards, right?
We have, of course, all their names. This is all privileged information. We don't even share it among each other, other than the fact that we give raw numbers. Like, for example, in my new enterprise, which is more towards veterans, we abolish $1 million worth of medical debt at the end of every month to celebrate. And in this celebration, we buy the medical debt. I buy it just like any civilian does, even though I'm on the board now. So we buy the debt and we forgive it. And we use it to create awareness because it gets people's attention, just like it got your attention. How much? For whom? What's the trick? What's the scam? That's what people used to ask me when I first started it.
Wow. So can you disclose how much money you've actually, you've paid off $8.5 billion worth of debt. How much money did that cost to do that?
That costs, anybody got your calculator out?
No, I have a pen and paper.
You divide 8.5 billion by 1/100th. So we paid 1/100th of 8.5 billion.
Great work, Steve.
I don't know how many billions you can get up there.
Wow, that is mind-boggling.
But I can tell you this much. I think Bezos has an ex-wife. Have you ever heard of her?
Yeah.
Well, she heard about us.
Mackenzie
Scott.
Right.
Yes. Well, she heard about us. It does help. And thank you, all you journalists and all you alt journalists, for getting out the word about things so people be aware of it. She became aware of our charity, and secretly she started investigating RIP medical debt, checking us out. Then she had people call and say, well, you have an interested donor. We need to know more. So we gave them more. And she proceeded to give us $50 million.
15?
50 million.
50 million?
Yep.
Wow. So how many people, and then I'll get to you in a minute, Mike, how many people have been liberated from medical debt by you?
5.4 million. And by the way, I've only met 3 of them.
Rob Call, this is a great story for Op-Ed News.
I hope he's listening.
Yes, I'm sure he is. Absolutely. His ears have turned red since you came on. So that's really amazing. All right, it's RIP medical debt. And you've liberated 5 million people from medical debt. That's
5.4. That's
a lot of people.
Yes. And now I'm in another campaign. I created a what they call public benefit corporation called Let's Rethink This. You know, what doesn't need rethinking? And I'm focusing now on veteran medical debt through the VA, and veteran suicide. And that's why it's a radio program. You may have heard of Kerry Harrison.
I love Kerry Harrison.
I love that guy. Well, Kerry Harrison, we have a program called Rethinking Heroes on KPFK every Friday morning from 9 to 10 drive time. And the purpose of that is to get the people on there, the thinkers, the people who know how to bring the solutions, not just bitch about the problems. That's what we're doing.
Wow. Fantastic. Mike Hirsch, go ahead, jump in, please.
Jerry, I met you through Joel Siegel
I
some
love him.
years ago.
What's your
And
name? Who is this?
this is Mike Hirsch with Progressive Democrats of
Oh,
America.
yes, Mike. How are you? Mhm.
I'm doing great. And I'm doing even better hearing those numbers.
Thank
If there's
you.
anything that makes my heart light and happy, because I think I speak for everybody, we hear a lot of complaining and a lot of people diagnosing problems, and that's important. Diagnosing a problem is very important. But when it comes to bitching and moaning and not any, solving and doing, it gets depressing for me. And what you're better than a million tablets of Prozac or whatever, because what you're doing is bringing hope. And
I'm your local dealer. You're a
that,
dealer,
well,
dealer for hope.
what is it, Dr. Feelgood?
Not,
So I
Doc-
just
not Dr. Phil, Dr. Feelgood.
that better than a million Dr. Phils and Dr. Oz's combined.
Oh, God.
Because what you're doing is lifting people out of depression and hopelessness. And I'm sure we all understand that medical debt or any debt like that, but especially medical debt, because you've had a health situation which made it hard for a
Yeah.
person to work, and often even insured people are not covered.
Yeah.
And for a lot of the things, they pay the money every month. That's right. And they do not get, the insurance companies run away. It's like the 100-yard dash in the Olympics, or
I'll tell-
100-meter
visuals-
dash, I guess, nowadays. And
those
they run
big
away
visuals
from their
help.
obligations.
Yes.
And here you are. But the magic of this is that these people have been so beaten down and incapable of paying back the debt because of what we just said. And here you come along, literally like a guardian angel, and you lift that burden from them and you wipe that slate clean. And I'm sure that those letters, when people get them, are life-changing.
Yeah.
And it's just absolutely wonderful what you're doing. A friend of mine, Stephen Spitz, asked if you knew Donna Smith, who was in the movie Sicko.
No,
Well, she has been burdened by medical debt. She's had the most catastrophic series of health challenges, both her and her husband, and they're among the nicest, most wonderful people. So we'll try to get them together with you. And but it's great to see you again, Jerry. I'm sure Joel would be here, but I was with him on Capitol Hill, and he has to get back to North Carolina. But I'll take the liberties of saying he wishes you the best, because I know he does. And thank you for all you're doing. It's just wonderful.
thank you
It
so
is
much.
mind-boggling. Thank you for that, Mike. Tatanka Bricka?
Yeah, I came in a little late, so I missed the beginning, but I'll catch it later. Thank you so much, Jerry. What a great story. So if I've got this right, you raised about 1/100th. What you raised about 85 million to do all this billion, okay? And it benefited 5.4 million people. So it cost you less than $20 per person to liberate their debt.
Yes.
That's incredible.
On average, it's interesting about medical debt. It's not catastrophic medical debt could be $1,000 for a family. They will lose their home. They will lose jobs. They can't meet that. The average person can't come up with $500 of free money to be able to help them to handle a problem. I want to give you a couple of other things as long as we're doing the outrageous bit. The outrageous part is that when I started this, I was my youth. I think it was my mid-70s when I started this. So as part of this is ridiculous. Here's a guy, a former debt collector, who walks into Occupy Wall Street as a debt collector. He walks out of Occupy Wall Street as a debt forgiver. Now, how ridiculous is that? You can't make up that story. And then, on top of everything else, even though I've been a very, I would say by anybody's standards, a progressive, a liberal person, always caring about others, I wasn't overly active. I've been in marches, I've been in this, and I've been that. But this was my first opportunity to be involved in something where everybody that was involved with it wanted it to disappear. We wanted to get rid of our charity because we didn't think it needed to be here. And that's what you guys are doing, is changing that. Now, I want you to know that RIP is working on the policy level now. We're working upstream. I'm not just sweeping up after the parade anymore.
Wow.
Good
I
for
have
you.
a Zoom. I want to be in touch with you, invite you to speak to ours as well, because we're working on policy level. And
Wonderful.
I just want to thank you, Harvey, because your show attracts incredible people with incredible stories like this. So
Well, we
thanks.
have Eileen Proctor to thank for this. Eileen put me in touch with Jerry a while ago, and it's such a mind-boggling. What happened to the people? We had 60 people with us, by the way, and we are live streaming as well. What happened to the people who set out to do student debt? What happened to that operation?
First of all, it was painful to lose that company, because we had meetings in Occupy. We met at our apartment, my apartment, to do strategy and this and that. And it was heartbreaking when they said, no, we're going to do something else. And they started the Debt Collective. And the Debt Collective has been very competitive with me. They've been able to abolish billions of dollars of student debt, which annoys the hell out of me.
Well, come on.
By the way, how old are you now?
86.
86. Cool.
I got to tell you a quote from Leonard Cohen. In Leonard Cohen's Fabulous, and if you ever want to listen to a Leonard Cohen album, listen to Live in London. And he got up there and he said, he was in his 70s, and he said, about 15, 16 years ago, when I just turned 60, I came to London to go on tour. I was just a kid with a crazy dream. So I guess that was you when you were in your early
That
70s.
qualifies. Yes, thank you.
Wonderful, Jerry, wonderful. Does anybody, Myla, you're on the stack somewhere? Myla?
Yeah, here I am with my May Day.
Oh, there you are. No one.
Happy May Day, everybody.
Oh yeah,
Well,
May Day. Happy May Day.
I made a,
Anyway, at any rate, Jerry, I know you must have a lot of free time and attention. And so we also invite you to get involved with RIP nuclear power.
I'd be
Yeah.
in favor of that. And
Let's shut them down. We could use your help.
yes, I'm on. See,
Thank you. Oh, great.
what am I going to do again? I'm
Yeah,
back.
you have to have a fund to invest in renewable energy.
Yeah.
We have this, and we're going to talk about this in the second hour. We have this lunatic movie out by Oliver Stone, Nuclear Now, but we also have a movie called The Women of 3 Mile Island. And what has to happen now is that all the money we have, all the spare change has to go into renewables, and especially battery breakthroughs, as
Yes.
Ron Leonard is about to tell us. So, Jerry, let's talk to Ron Leonard. Ron, go ahead.
Hey, Jerry, how are you doing? Harvey and I happened to be in New York City together unceremoniously on Earth Day. And I was explaining to him that I was on the original Earth Day in Manhattan, and I was with this group called Merry Pranksters.
Yes.
So what we're going to do is give you an honorary membership to Merry Pranksters, because you pulled the biggest prank on this industry that I've ever heard of, and I congratulate you.
Absolutely. Very
And
good.
I want you to know I really pissed
It's
off.
just wonderful. And the best part of the joke, the best part of the joke is that you got away with it.
Thank you.
Yes. And you're still getting away. I mean, I assume you're still doing this, yeah?
Oh, yeah. We're going to hit 10 billion probably in the middle of this year. And maybe we can finish the year off with 11 billion. And next year is our 10th anniversary of existence. So we'll have a big gala.
Wow.
for that.
So do
You were
collect-
about to say you pissed off someone, Jerry, and then
Yeah, the debt collection industry.
yeah, right.
you bit the hand that fed you.
I
so-
sure did.
Do you?
So Harvey and I are about to piss off the utility industry by relieving ratepayers from their debt. Price for electricity went up 17% on average for the United States, and California went up 100% in 10 years. In New York State, it went up approximately 40% in some areas. So I think maybe we can replicate your joke.
I think
Let's
I would
hope.
love to see you do that. Let me put something in the,
Please put it in the chat.
email.
And from your mouth to God's ears. Justin LeBlanc and then Wendy Lederman. Justin,
Am I complete? What do I do now?
just stay with us. We got some questions.
Okay.
Hello, Jerry.
Hi there.
Thanks for showing up here and giving us your story. And in regards to all this money management, I'm wondering what your thoughts are on A, Citizens United, and two, there's a bill that Seattle created that allowed to cut out those who have too much investment from foreign entities from participation in elections. And it's been running for 2 years now,
How's it doing?
unchallenged even by Amazon, who had spent $1.5 million on city council, and that is now gone. And so they want to export it to other states and other jurisdictions. And I'm wondering what your thought is in relation to, you know, debts. We have corporate overlords, right? How do we handle that?
Well, that's a multifaceted question. First of all, any organization that's doing good, and by that I mean really good as opposed to eco trips, they have my support 100%. Then I look to see why aren't they getting out their word better? Certainly Citizens United, everybody knows that. They've done a great job of getting the word out on that. The one in Seattle, I'm not so familiar with, but I'm aware of it. So to me, and here's how it works for me for both my Let's Rethink It as well as RIP medical debt. Number one, if they don't know about you, they can't do anything about you. Number two, it's not that they know about you. It's not just that. It has to touch them. It has to anger them. It has to piss them off. It has to have them fall in love. It has to resonate with them. It has to touch their heart. So when you have an organization that somebody becomes aware of it and it touches them, then the next thing, of course, is education. And education, whether it be websites or I did the very first medical debt summit that was ever created. And that's not my world, but it had to be done. So things like that, education. And then once somebody is aware, touched, educated, the only thing left is action. And that's either going to the polls, that's either making a donation, that's showing up someplace, that sort of thing. I don't know if that's helpful to your question.
Yeah, it is. It's great. Wendy, thank you, Justin. Thank you for that. Wendy and Rob Call has a question. Wendy Lederman and Rob Call.
Thank you so much, Jerry. This is one of the coolest stories that I have heard in so long. What you're doing is just absolutely heroic, and it just proves what can be done if people are creative enough. It's wonderful. And on the note of what you were just explaining about just kind of joining forces, like I really hope you'll come back and keep joining us and just become a part of our group, because there's so much to learn from you. And there are so many groups working on different things that is just really important to collaborate. I'll put one in the chat for somebody that was here a couple of weeks ago called Nonpartisan Reformers. And you just mentioned a moment ago of getting people to the polls. I know several states, I'm in Florida, where a lot of craziness is happening. And I think certain issues like environment and the water and also healthcare is something that everyone can come together around, and it transcends. So when there's certain states that are working on like ballot amendments and initiatives, I think we have one starting in Florida that might be something to align with as well, because that gives fundamental rights to people, but it also gives people that might not come out to the poll a reason to go vote and activate. And so I just really wish you the best. I hope you keep coming back with us and just keep doing what you're doing. It's fantastic and amazing. Thank you so much.
Let me do a riff on that before Rob comes on. This is a very political item. I never thought medical debt would be a political item, but we all know it's a political item. And so I've aligned myself with different organizations, one of which is in North Carolina. I'm talking to people down there about having the Democratic Party abolish medical debt as part of their approach of getting attention, bringing awareness to it, not just the same preaching to the choir, but look, we're going to take care of everybody. So, yeah, I'm 100% behind, which is the second thing. Another revelation is that it's not about RIP medical debt. It's not even about what your guys are talking about, what your important work is. Nobody cares about you. They care about what you do. What's that impact going to be? And so the very first people that called me after John Oliver, I pick up the phone and there's a mega church in Dallas, Texas. And the guy on the phone says to me, I heard about y'all on TV and something about medical debt. Could you tell me more about that? And in my regular English, I said, well, of course I can. And he says, how much would $50,000 buy in medical debt? And I said, that's about 5 million. He said, okay. So he says, let me talk to some folks. I'll give you a call back. He calls me back in about 15 minutes. He says, we're going to make that 100,000. Do you have 10 million? Do you have $10 million worth of medical debt in the Dallas area? And yes, there's billions of dollars worth of debt in every area. Okay. So we did the research. We found the $10 million. They sent us 100,000. They then took that gift. And when did they announce it? Easter Sunday. There's some strange thing about forgiveness in Christians. I don't know what it is, but they got a thing. So what happened is that the congregation went crazy. They were loving it. And then the local newspaper heard about it. So the newspaper had to come down. And then the TV station had to come down and film them because of this unusual approach to using the resources, not about come to my church, because what they did is they took the marketing budget to send out postcards to people to come to church, and they use that instead to abolish medical debt. How's that for a story?
That's amazing. Do you have the guy's phone number by chance?
Are you born again, brother?
Yeah, you got it. Rob, Rob, did you want to add something?
Yeah, well, first, I would think that if they could notify all those people in their town whose debt they relieved, they might get a couple of people showing up at church.
It's strangely enough, that's exactly what happened. Because of the publicity, people came to that church because they wanted to understand what kind of a church would do that. That resonates with me. So everything that you guys are doing, Mayday, this, that, let's rethink this. Every one of us needs to have people aware of us, but it ain't going to be saying, let me tell you more about myself. It's going to be, let me show you what we do and do it with us.
Well, you know, I wrote a book.
Go ahead, Rob.
I did a radio show for about 12 years called The Bottom Up Show, and I wrote a book called Bottom Up Revolution. And what you're doing is a very bottom up thing, helping so many people this way.
Yeah.
I have a couple little questions. One, what percentage of the debt that can be bought at 1 cent on the dollar or have you been able to buy? And how much more is there possible? What's the total realm of that?
Okay.
And what percentage of the total healthcare annual budget is that a part of?
Okay, what's on the market, not on the market, what's owed by Americans to hospitals right now is something like $80 billion.
Oh my God.
Okay.
You've covered 10% of it.
That's correct.
It's incredible.
That's astounding.
Well, it took us 10 years, but we're getting sharper. Here's what happened. It used to be we could only go to debt buyers, and debt buyers are people that go to the hospitals and they buy the debt from the hospital. You know, they go to some finance officer and say, I say, you got $100 million worth of nothing sitting in that filing cabinet. I'll give you 3 or 4 million for it. That's cash, 100% of something. And so they sell that debt. And when the debt buyer gets it, they own it. They own you. They own your medical debt. They can call you. They can harass you. They can ask for every single penny you owe, even though they paid a nickel on it. So that's how I subverted that industry. On top of that, I got tired of dealing with them. So we ended up getting a Health and Human Services, Office of the Inspector General. We got permission to go directly to hospitals. We don't even need them as a middleman anymore.
But the people who are buying that debt at 3 cents on the dollar or penny on the dollar, they're basically doing it so that maybe they can take 5% of those collections and make some money. So they can take that $1 million worth of debt and for $10,000 come back with $50,000, right?
Yeah, that's how it works. What they do, they're numbers people. They're all,
Yeah.
it's all Wall Street. It's all.
So I would think that if they have the other 95% that doesn't go anywhere, that makes it worth maybe a half a cent worth. They're worth less, but it could there's got to be like, is there a bottom to how little you can pay to get that debt?
Well, yes. For example, when we talk to these debt buyers, they've already run these people through the ringer a few times. So they know the damn debt
They
is.
harass them.
They harass them. Legal
They terrorize them.
terrorizing. So here the people are, they ain't got the money. They'll never have the money. And the debt collector, because they sell that debt to debt collection agencies or even collect it on themselves. So the debt collector, they only collect maybe 3, 4, 5, 6% of that portfolio, but they've made their money 2 times over, 3 times over.
So the government for $800 million a year could clear out everybody's debt like that.
Now we're talking about human nature and we're talking about greed, aren't we? We're talking about, that offends me to think that we would actually abolish people's medical debt. What did they do to deserve that?
I had to pay. Why shouldn't they?
Yeah, just like student debt. Those sucker kids at the age of 18, they can't make a better decision than that.
Well, I will say one thing about Medicare. My parents were pretty healthy most of their life, and then in their 75th year, they got sick. They probably ran up $1 million worth of medical bills. My parents did, but they had Medicare. And, you know, we
Thank God for
mourned
that.
Lyndon Johnson for the war in Vietnam, but my mother's mantra at the end of her life was, thank God for Medicare. If it
Yes.
hadn't been for Medicare, I wouldn't have had a house and I couldn't have put my kids through college.
Yes.
So
And yet we have political parties that want to destroy that want to take it away from people.
yes, they're doing it. They're trying it right now. Absolutely. Okay, we're going to take 2 more calls and we're going to move on. Shauna Foster, you're with us to talk about global warming. Are you good for a while? Can you wait
Yeah.
till after 6 or is your schedule tight?
No, I'm good.
Good. Okay, we'll start the second hour. We're going to start the second hour, by the way, with one of the funniest news stories I have ever read. It's going to be read to us by Tatanka Bricka. It's about, I'm going to give it away, but you will not believe this story in today's Los Angeles Times. It's about a woman who had an orgasm in the middle of a Los Angeles Coliseum, LA Phil at the Walt Disney Concert Hall. And Tatanka and I were laughing about it earlier, and he did a great dramatic reading of this news story. So we're going to start with that at 6 o'clock. And then Shauna will do your talk on global warming, and then we're going to have Charlie Komanoff tell us about the crypto industry's incredible consumption of energy. And then Kevin Camps will hopefully join us to talk to us about Ohio's incredible sinking nuke. So that's all in the second hour. Shauna, we appreciate your patience. So, and if you have any medical debt, go ahead and send it to Jerry.
Yeah, let me know.
All right, Milo Reason and then Lynn Finerman, please. Milo and then Lynn.
Jerry, yes, thank you, Harvey. You know, you may be aware of the fact, and most people here are, that the trans community is really under attack, and in many states, medical care is out of their reach, partly because the state legislatures in reactionary states have been not covering care for the medical needs of trans people. And I'm just wondering, I know it isn't debt per se, but this is a group of allies of ours who are just really under siege right now. And I'm just thinking about how somehow this part of your work might be focused in a way to give them some relief when it comes to providing funding for medical care that is now out of their reach.
And see, that becomes a campaign, and campaigns are the way to go. A campaign has a beginning, middle, and end. The end is to raise that amount of money to be able to do a certain thing. And along the way in a campaign, the raising awareness is the most important element. And along with, of course, bringing people on board to do things. I would say that in our Rethinking Heroes radio show, KPFK, we interview people who have solutions. Like my campaign is a solution to the needs that trans people have or are going to have. And that's what we do, is we take that and we turn it into a podcast or a video cast, which you can then use in fundraising and everything else. If that's helpful, that's my approach to things.
Great. Marla, did you want to add to that before we go to Lynn?
No, thanks a lot. But, Harvey and I both had a show on KPFK called California Solartopia, and which is focused not only on shutting down nuclear power, but also on bringing, helping to bring into fruition a true, clean Solartopia. Anyway, maybe Harvey can be in your show sometime.
Yeah, Jerry, you should have Marla, me, and Ron Leonard, who's a founder of the green energy movement, to talk about practical solutions to our energy situation. So
you're on.
We'll put our hat in the ring.
Yeah, you know how to reach.
I do indeed. I got your phone number off a wall in a doctor's office, actually. Lynn Feinerman, and then we're going to move on. Lynn?
Okay.
Yes, hi, Jerry. I'm wondering, I just saw that there is an announcement that Janet Yellen had said that in June or by June 1st, the United States will have run out of cash, unless, of course, that was the Onion and I didn't notice. I wonder, I wonder what your view is of that.
Well, what is anybody's view about defaulting on something, a debt that you already know that has nothing to do with the need to go forward? It's paying the debt. It's paying the debt. So the anger that I would have, or anybody would have, is the misinformation and the disinformation that's fed to us constantly. Really, the biggest challenge we're going to have going forward in America is figuring out who's telling the truth. Who's telling the truth. So what am I expecting? I'm expecting, knock on wood, that the Republicans who are in the House will come to Jesus or Buddha or Moses or somebody and say, this is about a stupid thing, and get real about it. That's what I'm hoping for.
Well, unfortunately, they're probably going to come to Jamie Dimon, but maybe we should start an organization to pay, abolish America's debt and pay off 1 cent on the dollar on the national debt. Maybe that would work. Jerry Ashton, what a joy to have you with us. You're going to come back at some point. Do you keep the letters that do people send you letters of gratitude?
Yeah,
that would be a great book.
We have it's a star trove. It really is. It'll bring you to tears.
Well, I think you should publish anonymously, of course, take their names off, but publish their stories, unless you already got them here. Steve has put up a website, RIP Medical Debt. There you go. Yep. Everybody, for feel good, we should go to RIP Medical Debt.
And don't forget,
we'll have you back.
And don't forget, go to letsrethink.this.com so I can start publicizing you.
All right, great. And Mila, Ron and I will join you on your Friday morning show or whenever it is. And we'll connect. And thank you, Eileen Proctor, for leading us to you. We have a couple of things I want to say to hi Sheila. We want to say to my listeners on on Progressive Radio Network, who've been listening. This has been the 135th Grassroots Emergency Election Protection Coalition meeting. As always, we rebroadcast on Gary Knowles' Progressive Radio Network. We're about to sign off, so thank you, Dylan and Rodney for running the show. Steve Caruso and Mike Hirsch and Wendy Lederman, our co-conveners, along with Mila. Thank you so much, and stay tuned. If you want to see the second hour about coming up, go to electionprotection2024.org, and you'll see the posting. We're going to talk for at least another hour about various issues, including energy, especially, and the environment. So thank you all for that. Jerry Ashton, again, it's been a pleasure, and keep on keeping on. We really appreciate it, and I'd love to see and hear some of those testimonials. We did advertise, thank you, again, we did advertise in today's flyer that we were going to talk about Zooey Zephyr. I saw Zooey Zephyr talk to the Montana legislature, of which she has been a member, about trans issues, and they threw her out. You know, these legislatures, Tennessee threw out the two guys demanding that they deal with gun control, and now Zooey Zephyr, who's been talking about trans issues, she's been thrown out. It's outrageous what they're doing. People cannot handle the truth, as Jack Nicholson said in An Officer and a Gentleman. So I have put out a feeler to her. I hope Zooey Zephyr will come on and join us at a future Greek gathering. But, you know, it would be an honor to have Zooey Zephyr with us. So we look forward to that happening. And I hope to hear back from Zooey soon. Wendy Lederman in the fascist state of Florida. We want to get, since you have your hand on the pulse of Ron DeSantis, he has been fingered, I would say, as having been a torturer at Guantanamo. And it's one of the most astounding of things I've read for quite a while. Can you tell us a bit about the latest horror show from Ron DeSantis, and then also about Cop City in Atlanta? And then at the top of the hour, we're going to transit over to our LA Phil story, and then Shauna Foster will fill us in on global warming, and Charlie Komanoff on the energy use of Bitcoin. Go ahead, Wendy, please.
Thank you. Yeah, there's some bad jokes and a finger on the pulse of DeSantis when it's like, just, is there a pulse there? I'm trying to find it. I don't know. I'm trying to find the heart in any of this. There's a story that has come out in a couple times. It keeps unraveling, and it kind of explains a little bit of the heartless nature of some of the actions we've seen that are just beyond conscience. So, some former detainees at Guantanamo, and keep in mind of like the 70-something people that were held at Guantanamo were never even charged with crimes. I think only like 8 people were ever charged or found guilty of anything. So it's just an illegal war crime that it exists in the first place. And in 2006, DeSantis was a naval JAG officer, and he was basically a lawyer assigned to make sure that there were no human rights abuses. And now these detainees are coming out. When they started seeing his face as the governor, they're like, oh my God, that's the guy that was overseeing my torture. So he might not have necessarily, like when they were being held, being force fed, and I'm not really clear on exactly the extent. Like, I know that they were fed like ensuring a lot of times they were like on hunger strike, protesting, being there. And some of them were like 18 years old, like they were kids when they were there. And there's some really gruesome stories of other ways that they were force fed that are unconventional, to say the least. I'm not sure that DeSantis was there for that. I'm not unsure he wasn't, but he was there to make sure that these abuses would not happen. And one guy came forward and he's like, that's the guy that was standing there laughing, watching me be tortured. And we're crying and screaming. and he's laughing. And then
Well,
another one.
It's not, oh my God, look at that. It's not often that we see Ron DeSantis laughing, right? So if this is what he laughs at, God help us.
Yeah. And then a second one came out and said, yeah, I saw him too. And then apparently amongst each other, the detainees are relating. And so he was actually confronted about it recently because, of course, the media is not really covering it as much as it should. It's starting to come out with it because, like, what kind of sociopathic tendencies? I mean, these are war crimes. Anything that happens at Gitmo, anyone who keeps Gitmo open, I mean, it's a whole nother story. But this is, I mean, an illegal detention center that goes against any Sixth Amendment or any right to due process. And so he was confronted recently where someone was just asking about it, and he like had a freak out, like kind of just like broke down. He's like, what are you talking about? Like, why would they even know that it's me? Like, what are the odds? How are they going to know me from Adam? That was 2006. Who like, and just, I mean, just didn't respond like a normal person, and really, and had no actual grounds of an alibi or any like reason to claim like, no, I wasn't there. That wasn't like nothing substantial to say. He just freaked out. Like, how would they know that was me? How would they even remember? And just really ridiculed. And that just shows the type of person that's in power right now. And we have a legislature that's full of people that condone this behavior. And it's a deep, deep problem when it shows how far somebody, like how far is this person willing to go to usurp power, to use their authority to their own means when they clearly don't have a conscience,
Right.
a conscience at all.
So there's an assignment to you, Wendy, and everybody else. If we can track down any of these people from Guantanamo and have them on the call, we want to give them a public forum. And I'm sure they're not getting one. So there was a picture, Steve flashed on a story of one of the guys that DeSantis allegedly tortured. And it would be great to have that person on if we can find them and if they're willing. So
I know.
I do want to stand corrected, by the way. Jack Nicholson, when he said you can't handle the truth, the movie was not Officer and a Gentleman. I believe it was A Few Good Men.
It was.
I don't, is that right?
It was A Few Good Men.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
so there you go.
Close enough.
We need to have a few good men on this Zoom to talk about what Ron DeSantis did about at Guantanamo, and I'm sure it'll be one of their biggest forums. So let's see if we can track him down.
Yeah,
Okay,
and
the other thing was Cop City, and then we're going to go to Shauna, and then Charlie and Kevin Camps has joined us. How you doing, Kevin? Go Blue. And Wendy, what's the latest from Cop City?
Yeah, you got it. And just about the detainees really quick, I should add that Deepa Driver held a forum in London with Jeremy Corbyn, and it was a really amazing forum. And there was an art exhibit after the speaking of art done by the detainees of their experiences. They're depicting it. So I'll reach out to her and see if we can have anybody speak about that. But I just think I don't even know what I think it is, but they're putting that out there and they're doing it, and it's creative. Cop City, another torturous type situation that is illegal and beyond the bounds of what we would consider constitutional or ethical or conscionable. So Cop City is reported last week. Tortuguita Manuel Paez Terán is he just turned 20. Well, he would have turned 27 if he wasn't gunned down by the troopers, the police that are funded by the Atlanta Police Foundation, which is a private nonprofit that is funded by Coca-Cola, Norfolk Southern, Chick-fil-A, UPS, all the Morgan Stanley, all the big corporations. They're funding this building of this police training facility. And it's not just a police training facility, it would be the largest in the country. It's for suppressing urban warfare, basically. And Tortuguita his autopsy was found that he was shot 57 times while he was sitting in a tent with his hands up, trying to protect the Weelaunee Forest. And the Weelaunee Forest is sacred land just outside of Atlanta. And it was Creek territory, Muskogee Indian territory. And later it has a whole history with just occupation and it's not only has historical and sacred significance, but the ecological significance. They're already starting to clear cut the forest, and there's already runoff happening into these waters, but this plays a major role in like any kind of like, I mean, always flood mitigation, but just cooling the temperatures in the hot summers of Atlanta, fresh air with all the like pollution of being in an urban center, and the fact that there just apparently isn't a whole lot of in this area for the lower income communities, that like there's, I guess, a study done where it says like most of the plants are like on people's property because the public investment isn't there in the lower income community. So this is just an incredibly important piece of land to the city, like sacred symbolically, and like the actual impact of what it brings to mediate climate change and the environment and protect the air and the water, and they're destroying it. And there's just the irony here is that the police are using excessive force, which is being covered up by the city. They won't release the body cam footage, and I think they finally released some of the names of the officers, but all this information is being covered by the whole state, this militaristic takeover of somebody who's trying to protect the climate, and building this thing will just exacerbate climate change and exacerbate the natural resources that are depleting in all urban areas. And the fact that the corporations are funding this through a private nonprofit that funds the police department. So the police have the city budget, and then they're funded by the corporations. Like, I mean, imagine like teachers or firefighters or like people that are public servants being funded all in secret by corporations. And so it's just, I mean, a terrible story that everybody should be watching and speaking out about, because I mean, it's just corrupt beyond corrupt. And an eco warrior, an eco protester was shot 57 times while sitting with his hands up. Like that's unimaginable, non-violent. They tried to pin it on him. And then there was a fundraiser that was held about a mile from the site. It was a concert. The police raided it. They arrested like 23 people on domestic terrorism charges and refused bond. The judge refused bond on like 22 of the 23 because like claims like their clothes are dirty. I mean, like domestic terrorism, like that's like, I know we haven't gotten to like Columbus right now, but if anybody saw in Columbus, Ohio, there were actual Nazis in the streets saying there will be blood about the drag show that was happening inside. That's terrorism. I've never in my life seen on American soil terrorism like that. And peaceful protesters are being shot so they can build a training facility where they'll be trained by Israeli forces. The police would. So it's just incredible.
Terrible. All right, thank you, Wendy, for that. We really appreciate your reports and keeping your eye on those stories for us. Mary, did you have a hand, Mary? Butler Stonewall? So I was getting you unmuted here.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, go ahead, Mary.
Okay, I just wanted to give you guys a little heads up on Guantanamo. Guantanamo has actually put in to try to close itself. The government is the one that's refusing to close it, or you might say DARPA/Pentagon, because that is a perfect location for them to do more than just torture. There's a lot of experiments that are going on down there. And if you guys really want to feature this kind of information, you really got to get a hold of the people over at Democracy Now! I can tell you in 2010, they did a story about a nun who walked down the wrong aisle and saw something she wasn't supposed to, and was interned there for months and was even sodomized and tortured. And the only reason she escaped.
Okay, Mary, that was the 90-second limit kicking in, but we will come back to you later. Thank you for that. Can you give us just 10 more seconds? Let's unmute Mary for 10 more seconds, and then we'll go to Bruce Grief.
Okay, and then the other thing, I don't know if you guys knew it, but we had a gal here, another nun, who actually at 86 years old infiltrated a nuclear power plant in protest of nuclear power plants. She has recently passed. But I think it'd be really a marvelous thing if we could use her name in a movement and create a movement with her name.
What
and
is her
maybe
name?
get-
What's her name?
I'll print it out. I'll put it out on the website because it's a strange spelling.
Thank you so
All right.
much, Mary. Thank you, Mary. Bruce Grief, you're new to us, Bruce. I'm glad to have you on with us. Bruce?
Yeah.
And then,
So if you guys want to have Patricia Grimm on, she was one of the people that was arrested and denied bail for 30 days. I can put you in touch with her. It's kind of an interesting story because she was actually there. She went down for what she thought was a weekend, got arrested, and then got denied bail for 30 days and lost her job at Fordham University. But she might be an interesting guest. So you let me know and I'll put you in touch.
email us her contacts, please. That would be really great. I appreciate it. Stephen Kaiser, and then we're going to go to our comic relief. And then Shauna Foster, who's been waiting very patiently, is going to give us her report on her global warming work. Charlie Komanoff about Bitcoin, and the great Kevin Kantz has joined us from Toledo. Go ahead, Stephen, and then we're going to go to Tatanka.
Mary Butler Stonewall, could you elaborate on what DARPA is doing down at Guantanamo?
We will do that in another session. Can we do
Why?
that next week? Can you rejoin us next week and we'll talk more about Guantanamo? That would be great. Both of you, please come back next week and we'll do a lot more on Guantanamo, since we have an alum, Ron DeSantis, who has admitted, but he's been pointed out to have been a torturer there. So Steve and Mary, if you'll come back next week, we'll expand our discussion. Wendy will tell us a bit more about Ron DeSantis's great adventures at Guantanamo, okay? All right, so amidst all this grim talk, I can't resist. We rarely have a moment for comic relief, but I have to admit that I am a fan of classical music, and Tchaikovsky is one of my favorites. And, and this is in the department of, you couldn't make this up. It was on the front page of the Los Angeles Times, and I'd like a dramatic reading from Tatanka. If you can show the news story, Steve, and Tatanka, if you can, without breaking up too much, if you could read the story to us, that would be great. Then we'll go to Shauna Foster. But I have to tell you, I did not make this up, and this is not a fake story from the Los Angeles Times. So go ahead, Tatanka.
Well, this is Harvey's idea that I read it. We were cracking up at the time. After talking torture, I don't know how it's going to be. Okay, so concert, wait a second. What's the title? Concert goer lets out loud full body orgasm while LA Philharmonic plays Tchaikovsky's Fifth. Okay, scroll it down. Molly Grant was enjoying the LA Philharmonic's performance of Tchaikovsky's Fifth Symphony on Friday at the Walt Disney Concert Hall when she heard what she described as a scream moan erupt from the balcony. Everyone kind of turned to see what was happening. Grant, who was seated next to the person allegedly made the noise, told the Times on Sunday in a phone interview, "I saw the girl after it had happened. I assumed that she had an orgasm because she was heavily breathing. Her partner was smiling and looking at her like in an effort not to shame her. It was quite beautiful." Multiple people who attended the LA Philharmonic concert on Friday reported hearing a woman making a moaning noise during the second movement. One attendee and music producer, Magnus Fiends, described the sound on Twitter as a person having a loud, full-body orgasm. An alleged audio recording of the moment, where someone can be heard crying out during a quiet beat in the music, was making the rounds on social media. Friends who went to the LA Philharmonic last night are reporting that in the middle of the show, some lady had a screaming orgasm to the point where the whole orchestra stopped playing, tweeted journalist. Some people, something. However, people in the audience attendance said the musicians played through the disturbance without stopping. So it already had gotten magnified. The Times story sources and the audio recording of this support the account of the orchestra playing on. It's still exactly unclear what occurred in the audience. Friday's program, the luscious theme music. Oh, this is the quote I like. The luscious main theme was adapted for a popular love song. Tchaikovsky's skillful orchestration lifted the mood from sentimentality to high romanticism. It's presented in a wonderful way. One can't know exactly what happened, but it seemed very clear from the sound that it was an expression of pure physical joy, sort of classical music equivalent to that scene in a movie where someone's talking loudly in a party or a nightclub, and then the record suddenly stops and they say something that everyone hears. It was an unusual, surprising moment, but I think everyone felt that it was a rather lovely expression of somebody who was so transported by music that had some kind of effect on them physically, or dare I say, even sexually. That is the news in Los Angeles Times.
Right. Okay. Anybody who follows classical music like I do, I can highly recommend Tchaikovsky's Fifth Symphony. If it can evoke that kind of response.
Hey, Sluggo, you could say you'd like everybody to have what she's having.
Well, what movie was that? That was
When Harry Met Sally.
That's When Harry Met Sally. Do you remember who said that?
Meg Ryan.
No,
Meg Ryan made the outburst.
It was
Billy Crystal.
No, the actress was Olivia.
It was another woman in the restaurant.
All right, I quit. Sorry.
So anyway, anybody who wants to have a similar reaction to our calls, go right ahead, and we will not stop. We will not stop the orchestra. Okay, thank you for that reading, Tatanka. That was truly memorable. And as I say, I could not have made that up. So let's proceed. We got Shauna Foster, Charlie Komanoff, and then Kevin Camps. Okay, Shauna, I would play Tchaikovsky's Fifth Symphony, but we'd run into copyright infringement. So I will have to skip that part. Thank you, Tatanka, again. Truly memorable. Go ahead, Shauna. We look forward to you telling us about your great work.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, my name is Shauna Foster, and I'm a spokesperson with the Rainforest Action Network. I was invited to come and talk to you all today because we just released our 14th annual Banking on Climate Chaos report. This is like the standard of what banks are actually doing with their climate commitments. We revealed that since the Paris Agreement, the top 60 banks have funneled $5.5 trillion into the top 2,000 or so fossil fuel companies. The reason why we publish this report is because a lot of corporations love to say that they're green and doing everything they can for the climates and forests, but they actually aren't. And they spend quite a bit of a PR budget saying that they do care about the climate. And so we publish this report that shows exactly how much banks are financing fossil fuel companies. This is a really important report. It gets through a lot of loopholes. For example, with the Willow Project, lots of banks will have specific rules that say, okay, we don't finance projects that are happening in the Arctic because it's an ecologically sensitive area, or the Amazon, but they will still fund at what they call the corporate level. So they won't fund projects that are happening in the Arctic, but they have no problem funding ConocoPhillips. And so this sleight of hand, they go around having huge PR campaigns like, look at us, we're saving the Arctic. But at the same time, they're pumping billions of dollars into the companies who are destroying the Arctic. So that's what you get when you go into this report for Banking on Climate Chaos from Rainforest Action Network. We just published a report this a couple weeks ago, got lots of media and lots of people talking about it. For example, Game of Thrones stars were in Variety and on Guardian talking about Kit Harington and Rose, the couple there, they were talking about banking on climate chaos and how awful the banking industry is when they should be just not funding fossil fuels at all. Some people will say, well, but banks, they just kind of work at the mercy of the market. So this is not a big deal, but banks actually are a huge contributor to climate chaos through this funding. Because if you think about it, the fossil fuel market is very volatile. Last year, natural gas, for example, or methane gas was very, very expensive. This year it's bottomed out. And when these market forces go up and down, they get debt from banks in order to stay afloat. Well, market forces should have forced these industries a long time ago to turn to cheaper renewable energy, but they haven't done it because they are able to buy debt at a very cheap price from banks. Banks will also act as financial advisors for loser projects because they have money invested in it, convincing other banks to continue investing in projects that we shouldn't be investing at all, because the fossil fuel industry is honestly dying out if banks would let it. So that's why we tell banks they need to not be investing in fossil fuel projects at all. The very first step that they could do is to stop funding fossil fuel expansion, which is, any new infrastructure project, any new exploration in supply. They should stop funding that immediately and have clear, transparent goals about when they're getting completely out of the fossil fuel sector. So this is the 14th year that we have published this report, and we continue to engage with banks to verify the data. One of the most startling things from this year's report is that Royal Bank of Canada is the top fossil fuel financier for 2022. In all the other years that we've published the report, it has been JP Morgan Chase. And by and large, it's still US banks that are leading the way. 28% of that 5.5 or 28% of all money that was financed in 2022 to fossil fuel companies was US banks. And so that's still the largest share. And they are not moving at all. European banks are moving a little bit. They're a little bit better. But we really need the banking industry to stop doing these loopholes, to stop campaigning on the climate, and to actually just stop funding the fossil fuel companies.
Wow, great report. And thank you, Steve, for putting it up there. Can you give us the connections, the links to the report so people can follow up with that?
Yeah, it is bankingonclimatechaos.org. The report is produced. The Rainforest Action Network leads the work. We work with, there's a total of 8 authoring organizations, including BankTrack, Reclaim Finance, Sierra Club, Indigenous Environmental Network. Like, there's just a lot of work and analysis that goes through to look at the data. And we contact the banks and we say, hey, this is what is publicly available about your transactions with the fossil fuel industry. Is this accurate? And most of them verify it with us. So it's not spurious imagination. This is verified data. Some of the banks don't get back to us and verify their data, but we do, some of them do. Like JP Morgan Chase verified their data this year. It's up to the banks to get back to us and do it, but we do make every effort to confirm with the banks that the data that we collect is accurate.
Fantastic. Really, really great reporting, Shauna. We hope you'll come back and join us for more. Do you have people follow? How are people following up on this? Are you doing demonstrations or what's?
Yeah, we do demonstrations all the time. Shareholder meetings, shareholder season just happened with the banks. We were at Citibank, Wells Fargo, Bank of America the day before of their shareholders because their shareholder meetings, because there are resolutions that say, for banks to stop financing fossil fuel expansion, to be more transparent about their plans, to respect or to enact policies that would respect the free, prior, and informed consent of Indigenous peoples before they fund any project. And so we do direct actions there. And if you go to the bankingonclimatechaos.org website, you'll see where you can look up your own bank and see how much your investments are going to the fossil fuel industry. And so that you can send a message to your bank or message it. And a lot of times people will say, okay, well, what bank is good? The answer is very sad. There is no good bank. Like and this problem is not going to be solved by just migrating and going to another bank, although there are consumer-based organizations like Third Act, started by Bill McKibben, for people who really want to divest and move their money. But really, we need to put pressure on the banks as customers and say, we don't want you to do this, because banks spend a ton of PR making everybody think that they're great on the environment. And once you have this report in front of them and say, nuh-uh, you are lying, you invest so much money in fossil fuels, it just cuts right through their greenwash so you can get to the truth of the matter. Banks really change a lot because they spend a lot of money on these PR campaigns, and to sully their reputation is a waste, makes them waste that money, and they don't want to do that. So you contacting the bank is an incredible, powerful move. And if you want to divest and you try to move your money somewhere, I would sign up for Third Act to make sure that you're doing it in concert with other people, doing it at the same time, because if we just resort to individualistic solutions, that doesn't really change the system for the better.
Wow, thank you so much, Shauna. We're going to take a couple questions. I want to go to Charlie Komanoff and Kevin Camps. Mike Hurst and then Justin. Mike and then Justin.
Yeah, Shauna, thank you for joining us. We had Stephen Donziger on an earlier Zoom, and are you familiar with his situation? And can you give us a comment on that?
I've heard what I've heard in second-hand sources myself, but I haven't had the chance to.
So you need to connect with him.
Yeah.
I'm going to put his name in the chat, and you can write us. Steve Donziger, he's an attorney who has fought Chevron in Ecuador and is being totally shafted. By the way, the judge in Steve Donziger's case is now the judge in one of Trump's many cases. So hopefully we can get through somehow. But you need to connect with Stephen Donziger. Thank you for that. Thank you, Mike, for raising that. Justin and Tatanka, and then we'll go to Charlie K. Go ahead.
Hello, Shauna. So in addition to your statements about getting cheap debt from the banks, I'm wondering what your knowledge is about how the higher interest rates that have been happening are affecting any of that, and where the money is shifting to try to avoid paying back obligations that they're underwater on.
That's an excellent question. In 2022, with the interest rate rise, we did see the bond market crash. And that is also part of the bank collapses that are happening right now with SVB and First Republic, is that they thought their investments would be safe. And they weren't expecting interest rates and inflation to rise, which really just shows that banks are not very good about managing long-term risk. SVB was one of the banks that went to Congress and said, hey, we want you to turn down the regulations on us. And then they ended up crashing on it, right? And so that's why it's so important that we tell them you need to manage climate risk much better than you're doing. The insurance industry, for example, has not managed climate risk well, and insurance rates are quadrupling for people in the Gulf Coast states and in California and Colorado, where there's lots of wildfires. They will just keep on trying to make profit up until the last minute. So the Banking on Climate Chaos report does look at all different kinds of lending mechanisms. And that's why we say it's financing specifically, because it includes what we typically think of as lending, but it also includes bonds and underwriting and syndicated loans, which are all different forms of financing for fossil fuel companies. So with the rising interest rates, that's been one effect, is that the underwriting portion of the financing has shrunk. And then the other thing that happened in 2022 was blatant opportunism by fossil fuel companies from the Ukraine crisis to inflate the prices and reap a huge profit. So oil majors collectively in 2022 made $4 trillion in income, an astronomical number. And so they didn't take on debt. Last year in 2022, ExxonMobil asked for $0 in debt. Same with Shell PLC. This is all in the report of these oil majors that asked for zero debt and paid it off, because you're right now is not a cheap time to buy debt. And one of the interesting things is that the banks say, well, we need to make sure that our fossil fuel clients have the capital to do the transition. Well, in 2022, they got the capital, and what did they do with it? They didn't do any sort of transition things whatsoever. They even rolled back on some of their green programs. But even with ExxonMobil and Shell asking for $0 this year, banks still managed to lend out $684 billion to fossil fuel companies to try and get this short-term profit that they think is coming. But they're really creating a climate risk bubble.
Okay, thank you so much, Shauna. Tatanka, Sally G, and then Charlie, please.
Yeah, to make it short, thank you, Shauna, for the wonderful work you're doing at Rainforest Action. We at the Romero Institute, together with the Dolores Huerta Foundation, working at the Circle of 100 to get the entire principles, policies, and programs of the Progressive Caucus understandable to the American people. And part of that is coming up with solutions. And we've been very recently talking about the role of banks and looking for solutions for the corporate capture of the entire world, including much of the green movement and the entire direction of feathering in continued oil, continued nuclear, even trying to turn around and say nuclear is green. So really I'm going to look up and do all my research. How do you suggest? Do I get back to you? Do you have an email, or just get back to the appropriate person at the organization to continue this conversation?
Yeah, if you go to bankingonclimatechaos.org and scroll all the way to the bottom, my contact information is there. Glad to follow up to keep on working together with anybody who is seeing this or hearing this, who wants to work together on solutions and how we can really mainstream about how the financial industry is supporting the fossil fuel industry and how they shouldn't be.
Yep.
Donna, thank you so much. Put your contacts in the chat, if you will. Sally G, I'm going to get to you in a bit. I saw your note in the chat. I want to go to Charlie. So if you hold on, Sally, we'll get to you after these two presentations. I think your questions will be answered. Thank you so much, Shauna. Really amazing stuff. Much appreciated. And thank you
for having me,
Tatanka, for your dramatic reading. It is truly memorable. Okay, Shauna, thank you again. Charlie.
Hey, Harvey.
How are you here? Are
Yeah.
you with us? Okay. So Charlie Komanoff and I go way, way, way back. You may not remember, I crashed a funders meeting in I think it was 1976 or 7, and you were there, and with Hunter. What's something Hunter was his name? He's a really good guy.
David Hunter.
What was it? David.
Yeah, David Hunter, the late.
So
David.
you are a great expert on the economics of energy, and you have written a piece now for the Nation. You'll be followed, by the way, by Kevin Camps, who is patiently waiting. You've just put a piece in the Nation about the energy consumption of Bitcoin and crypto. Can you tell us about this piece? Because I found it's very critical.
Well, sure. I mean, my piece in the Nation, it's about Bitcoin, but it's actually about bigger issues like what should we be targeting, and the need for a carbon tax. And, you know, Harvey, I seem to be fated to be a contrarian, so I'm going to be saying some iconoclastic things in my little segment. I hope that's okay.
Of course.
But, you know, a month ago, the New York Times had a really fabulous Sunday front page above the fold, kind of expose. They dug into the Bitcoin mining sector in the United States, which is literally these factories consisting each one of thousands of computers that every second are doing literally trillions of calculations to get algorithms to match random numbers in ways that create Bitcoins, which are units of cryptocurrency. It's a completely parasitic, useless, stupid activity. We've all known about it for some time. We know that it consumes large amounts of electricity. What the Times did that was innovative is they found all 34 sites in the United States in 15 different states, Texas being the leader, that have these Bitcoin mining factories. And they got a consulting firm to calculate the amount of electricity that each of these factories is using and the sort of incremental carbon emissions that are resulting from that. So that was the article in the Times. And the Times, you know, used this pretty formulaic thing that all the carbon emissions are the same as so many cars driving for a year or so many US households, benchmarks that I don't think are terribly helpful. And so what I added to it was calculating the amount of big wind turbines, the big giant industrial wind farms that we all want to see come into existence, and many of us are fighting to make that happen. And in effect, I was able to calculate this really dispiriting number that these 34 Bitcoin mines are negating the carbon benefit, the climate benefit of 9% of US wind-powered electricity. And it's pretty sobering. But then I sort of tried to turn that around a little bit, inspired by the new film, How to Blow Up a Pipeline. And I did this kind of thought experiment. It's not terribly difficult. Harv, that if we had 34 commando teams, one for each of these damn Bitcoin mines, and if they, in a coordinated guerrilla effort, severed the cables, the power cables that are powering these Bitcoin mines, with the nearest fossil fuel electricity, that would be the amount of carbon reduction that would happen overnight would be equivalent to if we could just snap our fingers and bring into existence almost 4,000 giant wind turbines.
Wow.
And that raised the question for me, and here's where I'm going to get a little confrontational. Why are we not circling these Bitcoin mines? Why are we not demonstrating in front of them, blockading them, doing direct action against them? Because it's my belief, with all respect to your previous speaker, who's wonderfully committed and at least as smart as I am, I don't think going after the banks does one bit of good to abate the climate crisis. The way that I view climate and carbon and CO2 is that the bank for Exxon and Conoco and all of the rest of them is basically the 280 million US cars and trucks and airplanes and boats and other bullshit. They don't need banks, except, maybe to tide them over some little temporary aberration. All the financing that Exxon and the rest need to drill for oil that we buy and burn, and that is destroying our climate. The bank is our SUVs. In contrast, Bitcoin is something that is so sort of parasitical and obviously stupid, and that I think most Americans would have a certain sympathy. It's not like, don't try to pry my fingers from the wheel from the steering wheel of my car. I'll never let you do that. But if we went after Bitcoin and private jets and helicopters and super yachts and other toys of the libertarian plutocrat right, we would actually be doing something for climate, and I think we would have a tailwind of support from most Americans.
All right, very good. One thing, Charlie, we don't use 4-letter words, although yours was 8. But I don't think that one's
sorry.
allowed.
Yeah, I'm
Except
sorry.
in Yiddish. I know you know Yiddish, so if you want to curse as we go forward, then all the verkachte Yiddish you want to use is perfectly fine. We have 50 people with us. We're broadcasting live. This is the 135th Green Grassroots Emergency Election Protection Coalition Zoom. We're with Charlie Komanoff, and we're going to go after these questions to Kevin Camps to tell us about the amazing sinking nuke in Ohio. Thank you for that, Charlie. Very interesting. Sally G, we'll get to you now. Eric Lazarus and Stephen Kaiser.
I was thinking about public banking and for God's sake, don't use your credit card. Use cash. Don't give them an extra 3% on everything you purchase.
Interesting. Okay, but all the cash I get these days has white powder on it. I don't understand. But at any rate, thank you for that, Sally. Much appreciated. Eric Lazarus, and then Stephen, can I?
So I think I've heard the following proposal, and I wanted to get reaction to this. So if we simply made it illegal to use fossil fuel power for crypto mining, I've heard the case made that that would help drive down further the price of wind turbines and solar panels. The more economies of scale, the better. So if we cut the cables to these things, I assume they'll be back working in a matter of hours, days, or at most weeks. But if we made it illegal for them to use fossil fuels, then there's supposedly going to be economies of scale that make everything cheaper, and that's all to the better.
Yeah,
I'm curious
sure,
what anybody thinks of that. I'm Eric. Thanks.
I'm talking in symbolic terms primarily. I think that going after plutocracy and carbon at the same time would have great synergistic organizing power.
Very interesting. Okay, that Steve Kaiser, Wendy, and then Ron Leonard, and then we'll go to Kevin Camps. Steve,
Yeah,
Wendy, and Ron.
Charles, can you tell me what's going on when somebody is mining for Bitcoins and why it takes such vast amounts of electricity?
Great question. I really can't. When it, I'm a numbers guy.
Yeah, what is a Bitcoin
and an activist,
mining?
but when it comes to technology, I don't really get it. All that I can say is that somehow literally trillions of calculations a second are required to get random number generators to match up in some way that is embedded in the DNA of cryptocurrency. It's a technology that, was thought about like 15 years ago. And to give up maybe more credit than these guys deserve, maybe they just didn't think or couldn't imagine that the electricity and carbon and climate consequences of what we were doing, of what they were doing. But this maybe dovetails into my other point, which is that a carbon tax, as much as I would love to outlaw all kinds of crap, can I use that word, Harv?
Yeah.
Toilet word, that's a tough road to hoe. Whereas a carbon tax that would elevate the cost of fossil fuel burning across the economy might have at the beginning led to inculcating some greater efficiencies, or maybe even strangled the whole idea in the crib, which is what should have happened to it.
Very interesting. Charlie, you can consider the word chazarai. That would work. Wendy Lederman and then Ron Leonard. Go ahead. And then, we'll get to Kevin Camps.
I think maybe Conyo, if you want to go a different route, might work as well. Yeah, I think with the Bitcoin thing, I think a lot of it has to do with just the amount of information traveling so quickly, like to make these instantaneous transactions for so many people all at once all over the world. And on that note, I recently found out, which nobody's reporting on, but just your thoughts on CERN, like the Large Hadron Collider in Switzerland, which apparently is gobbling up like more energy than almost anything on the planet, and nobody even speaks about that. So I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's like, I think it's a 17-mile track or something like that, where you shoot an electron and then create like a black hole, and then like we all fall into the matrix, and it's all a paradox. But thanks anyway, I appreciate the report.
Thank you, Wendy. Charlie, do you know about CERN?
Not as much as I should. Thank you, Wendy.
Yeah, it's a
for
major
that.
energy,
But although I have to say that, my even though I'm bad at technology, I did grow up, with a certain veneration for the nuclear physicists of the late 19th and the first half of the 20th century. And I tend to cut enterprises like CERN slack, maybe more than I should. And whether it's worth allocating some resources for a multilateral, multinational scientific consortium that might continue to help unlock some of the secrets of the universe, which I'm all for, and B, might ultimately lead to fusion power, which might bypass some of the problems of fission power. You know, my personal vote, uninformed, is to ride with it.
Well, I'm following on this piece on Bitcoin. You might want to, I'd be interested to see what you find out about CERN. For those of you who are interested, my camera is doing a wild thing here, taking my Woodstock patch and turning it into ocean. See that?
That's psychedelic.
Pretty cool,
Yeah.
huh? Okay, Ron Leonard, and then we're going to go to Kevin Camp.
So Charles, I want to honor your chutzpah and your goal to actually go after this mess that we've created. And there's an important point about this is there's different levels of mess that is involved in Bitcoin. And I think the top level we probably should identify as a Bitcoin miner who has taken a closed coal plant, turned it back on, and used that to power the Bitcoin, as opposed to the other hapless Bitcoin miner that is setting up a field of solar panels in the back and using that to power their Bitcoin mine. The problem mostly with most of the Bitcoin miners in Texas, you saw it in the picture, these are using a series of racks of processors that are very fast. And the way they run, they are not 100% efficient. They create heat. And the way they cool these things is to put a fan in front of them. Now, the specific heat of air is lousy in terms of cooling. Now, some of these guys, when they started out in China, they figured that out. They figured that maybe we should immerse these things in a liquid bath and use a lot less energy to mine the Bitcoin. So there's levels of stupidity involved in the process. Science can solve some of them. I personally don't mind giving some Bitcoin guys the slack, as you mentioned, because maybe they're out to undermine the situation that we're all facing in terms of banks. But no matter what you look at the problem, it is a problem, and we should fix the problem, not just let it coexist in Texas, because Texas said literally to these guys, come on down here. We want you to mine Bitcoin in Texas. We'll give you unlimited electricity, dirty electricity, as opposed to New York. New York said about a year ago, you are no longer allowed to mine Bitcoin in New York State because you're using
actually, no, you're not allowed to do. I live in New York. You're not allowed.
Yeah, so do I.
You're not allowed to do new Bitcoin.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's exactly.
But Ron, one of the great things in that New York Times expose is they found that 85% nationwide of the incremental electricity that these 34 Bitcoin mines are requiring is from fossil fuels.
Exactly.
So the solar or the hydro is the rare exception. And even then, I'm going to be a little bit extreme and say that that field with the solar panels, hey, we need the solar panels to be displacing fossil fuels elsewhere on the grid, not feeding something parasitic like Bitcoin. But even more fundamentally, we're all tired of closing the barn door after the horses are gone. Why must we be in the reactive position of fixing problems created by this, capitalist, parasitic growth monster? And, Jerry Mander, who died last month, was one, he wasn't the only one, but he was one who forcefully and eloquently implored us as a society to get in front of these technologies and have them assessed and judged, and if necessary, rejected before they could metastasize.
Very well stated. Thank you so much. And I'm
no argument.
Gerrymandering. I love gerrymandering. That was his real name, and everybody who's scratching your head because we talk about gerrymandering all the time. This was the great gerrymander. Really great guy. He was from the Bronx, but he lived in Northern California. And he and his sidekick, who I also loved, Alvin Dutskin, who passed a year or two ago. This was a great team. Jerry and Alvin, we miss you guys. Tremendous loss. Charlie, thank you so much for that report. Very few people were talking about it. And you really broke some ground with this, so keep up. We appreciate it.
Thanks. Great discussion.
Okay, I put your contacts in the chat, please. Okay, Justin, if you'll hold, we're going to go to Kevin Camps, who's been patiently waiting. Kevin, we have yet another nuclear reactor that's sinking. The first that I heard of was Midland in Michigan, which thankfully never went online. You being a Michigan boy were part of that fight. Now we have Davis-Besse, which has more problems than you can even catalog. And you say it's sinking and the NRC is going to look at it. Tell us about this. What's going on? Kevin, you're good.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, so the news just broke about a week ago. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. So about a week ago, the NRC announced that sinking or settling of the land at the Davis-Besse atomic reactor in Northwest Ohio on the Lake Erie shoreline had caused damage to firefighting water supply pipelines. This took place last October. We're just hearing about it now. They looked at more land settling on the site last February and March. We're just hearing about it now. So yeah, it is a serious thing when land settling at a nuclear power plant interrupts firefighting capabilities. Yes, that is a problem. But the thing that occurred to many of us who watched Dog Davis-Besse right away is that we've known since 2011 that the shield building, which is the big thing you can see from miles away and is very heavy, and we've known since 2011 is severely cracked. The NRC, when we FOIA'd the NRC, there were documents that said a small additional load of any sort, be it an earthquake or you name whatever physical force hits that shield building, it could be the final straw. It could cause spalling of concrete on the exterior surface. Those huge chunks of concrete that fall to the ground could damage safety systems, components, equipment down below. Ironically enough, cause the meltdown in the reactor. The failure of the shield building could cause the meltdown at Davis-Besse, which the failed shield building could then not contain the hazardous radioactivity from escaping into the environment. So here we have a leaning Tower of Pisa situation at Davis-Besse with a severely cracked containment structure. And there's no plans to shut down. They're still operating as we speak. The NRC is downplaying the significance of this. But this is a reactor that should have shut down decades ago. It's had more close calls with catastrophe than any other that I know of. And certainly when the containment cracking came to light, that was the final shutdown warning. They're not shutting down. They gave this place a 20-year license extension. They're good to go till 2037. They'll likely apply for another 20 years. That would be 2057. This is the Davis-Besse atomic reactor in Northwest Ohio. So yeah, just to close real quick here for Q&A, the Midland nuclear power plant in Michigan was 85% complete, 2 units, and it was canceled at a loss of billions of dollars to shareholders and very likely to ratepayers as well, because safety significant buildings like the emergency diesel generator building were sinking into the earth. And there have been land settling incidents at Waterford in Louisiana, and also at Vogtle nuclear power plant in Georgia, which is significant because there are already 2 operating reactors there since the 80s, 2 new ones being built. This is the vestige of the Bush-Cheney nuclear relapse, 2 of 3 dozen reactors. These are the only ones still going forward, and they're doing very badly. They have land settling issues there too. So this is a safety issue. That's why the plug got pulled at Midland, thank goodness. But this is an old reactor, Davis-Besse, and we hope that this will be the final straw, but it's not going to be unless we make it happen.
Well, Kevin, doesn't the sinking of a nuclear plant conform with Jimmy Carter's promise that the reactors would be built underground?
Yeah, maybe it was by design. Yeah,
I couldn't resist.
I forgot. This is a slow motion design unfolding before our very eyes. So.
It is quite amazing. I mean, and of all the reactors, Davis-Besse is what? It's 50 years old. When it came on in the early 70s, right?
I believe it fired up in 1977 because it had a 3 Mile Island precursor incident 18 months earlier. It's the same design as 3 Mile Island. And the precursor incident happened and thankfully was averted before the worst happened. But that message was never communicated to others like 3 Mile Island from Davis-Besse. It was a cover up within the industry.
As I recall, the owners of 3 Mile Island sued the owners of Davis-Besse for not telling them about the accident at Davis-Besse. And if they had known, they would have been maybe able to avoid the accident at 3 Mile Island. Isn't that right?
Yes, there was an NRC whistleblower who tried to get the word out, but it was too little, too late.
Okay, okay, somebody's got some weird heavy metal. There we go. Okay, Stephen, Mary, and then Justin.
Yeah, Kevin, do you follow anything about the corruption of Southern Company out of Alabama? There's a guy named Legal Schnauzer or Roger Schuler and Donald Watkins that have been covering a lot of the corruption that went into the Southern Company and the Vogtle plant. I can put the link in the chat, but it's just so bad. It's just horrible, the stories you hear.
No, I'd be
I'll
interested.
put the link there. You go ahead.
There's legalized corruption. Of course, there's $12 billion in federal nuclear loan guarantees tied up in the Vogtle 3 and 4 new build. That's our money. If they default on the loan repayment, it's just gone. It's a zero risk, no interest rate loan from the federal government and taxpayers to Southern Nuclear, which I think is based in Atlanta. And another scandal that is legal because of the Georgia state legislature and governor is that the rest of the financing and costs are on Georgia ratepayers, a lot of whom are low income, a lot of whom are African American. So the real crime happens to be legal at Vogtle 3 and 4, and that is that the financing is free. This company has no skin in the game. So why wouldn't they build 2 giant new reactors? They have no skin in the game.
And you got to remember that it was Obama who gave them the first $8.3 billion interest-free federal loan. If it wasn't for Obama, the $34 billion fiasco at Vogtle wouldn't have happened. So, and you say Vogtle is sinking also, Kevin?
Yeah, Arnie Gunderson of Fairwinds brought that to my attention. Vogtle has all kinds of problems. They did a bad foundational pour that could be related to the sinking, probably is. They had bad rebar. This is way back in the early years after 2012. So the list of problems at Vogtle just structurally goes on and on. It's part of why they're so many years behind schedule. They're more than 5 years behind schedule at this point, and that kind of delay is what contributes to the escalating cost factor.
Well, if you look at Oliver Stone has this movie out. I haven't seen it. I heard I'm in it, actually. At the same time, we've got this new movie, Women at 3 Mile Island, which I'm going to review tonight. But if you look at the last 6 major reactor projects in the West, you've got the one in Finland, which is like 15 years overdue and just completely off the charts. You got the one in France at Flamanville, which is a catastrophe. You've got the 1 or 2 at Hinkley in England, which are also a total catastrophe. You've got the 2 reactors in South Carolina, which were canceled at a cost of $10 billion. And now you've got Vogtle at $34 billion, which you say is sinking. I mean, man, this is not an industry that you actually really want to be bragging about. Mary and then Justin. Mary Stonewall and then Justin LeBlanc. Are you unmuted, Mary?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, hold on one second. I was just gonna say, has anybody been paying attention to the fact that Berlin, Germany, is no more nukes? That they're basically outlawing them 100%, and the nuclear radiation, the committee over there is fighting them hard, but they're losing.
No, we won.
Maybe we need to look. I shared the article. Maybe we need to look to what they're doing to see if we can apply it here.
Well, you missed us last week, Mary. We celebrated the shutdown, as I'm sure Kevin did, of the last atomic reactors in Germany. It was April 15th, a day that will live forever in whatever you want to call it. And Germany had 17 reactors. And after Fukushima, Angela Merkel put out a plan and shut them all down. Unfortunately, in the middle of shutting them all down, starting in 2011, they got cold feet and they backtracked on some of their solarization. But all atomic reactors are shut in Germany now. And the irony is, and this is the great irony, one of them, there are many, is that France next door, which went totally nuclear and has 56 reactors, actually has shut, not permanently, but recently has shut twice as many reactors as were shut in Germany. Because between structural defects and overheated rivers, they shut more than 30 reactors in France, right, Kevin? Kevin, have you been following?
Yeah, the French nuclear shutdown is bigger than the German one, but the German one is 100% shut down, so.
Yeah, they're gone. They're done. And ironically, Germany, which has 0 reactors, is exporting energy to France, which has 56. And the nuclear industry is yelling at Germany because of rising CO2 levels. It's all going to feed export into France. Justin, and then Dory Raskin, I see your hand. We'll get you next.
So, yeah, you'd mentioned Jimmy Carter and his mentor Hyman Rickover before. What's important to note there is that that was through a Navy program, which is way different than a lot of these cost-cutting, corner-cutting, laissez-faire, libertarian, big corporations that really are there, not for responsibility or, stability. They're there just to extract. And so that is something to consider as well in as we talk about how these nuclear plants are run and why they're falling apart. The other thing that's worth mentioning in relation to that extraction is, it's not just Bitcoin, but really mining in general is, you get about 1 pound of usable material for 500,000 pounds of stuff you pull out of the ground. So we really need to be rethinking how we do our natural resources and how we do our energy, period. And, the sun always shines, so let's go Solartopia.
You got it. Thank you, Justin. And we got to remember that everything that's mined really needs to be relabeled as unobtainium. That's what it is. Dory Raskin. Dory.
Hi. I did hear you talk about the big mess at Santa Susana Field Lab site, where we've been trying to get it cleaned up for more than 30 years. And right now we got screwed by Newsom and by Boeing, and we got screwed by DTSC, and we're taking them to court. And that site is very contaminated. Kids are getting various illnesses, cancers. It's been a big mess, and it's been a long, long struggle.
Thank you, Dory. Kevin, have you been following the Santa Susana?
I forgot. And there's a wonderful documentary on Santa Susana. It's called In the Dark of the Valley. And if people want information, they could go to Parents versus SSFL. They could go read Michael Collins, did excellent reporting on Santa Susana Field Lab site for more than 25 years, and Committee to Bridge the Gap and PSR LA.
Thank you so much, Dorothy. Much appreciated. Kevin, have you been following?
Yeah, I just had
Go ahead.
I just had the honor and privilege of working with Melissa from Parents Against Santa Susana Field Laboratory and her family. It was the Alliance for Nuclear Accountability's annual DC Days last week. And they are a member group of the Alliance, as are we. So we went around Capitol Hill. We met with the Biden administration. They did a film showing at NRDC headquarters, and it's a powerful, moving film. If people haven't seen it yet, do check it out for sure.
In the Dark of the Valley. Okay,
Yes.
we'll check that out. Kevin, can you put the contacts into the chat? Have you seen the Oliver Stone movie yet? Has anybody on the call seen the Oliver Stone movie, Apocalypse Now? Oh, I'm sorry, Nuclear Now? My goal, my dream is to make, oh, there it is. Wow, look at that. This is about Santa Susanna?
Yeah, it's an excellent film. And it's well done and yeah. It's very
How old is
frustrating.
this? When was this film made?
About last year, maybe a year and a half. It's recent.
Okay, well, we should do a showing in LA in conjunction with this is from MSNBC, this film?
Well, what happened was that my friends did it, and then and it won some awards, and then I guess they decided to let MSNBC I don't know, buy it or used it or whatever. So it's now them.
Wow, I'm very impressed.
It's an excellent film. I mean, unfortunately, when they showed it, they really cut it off a lot, which was too bad. Interrupted a lot, but it's done well, and it's with my friends.
Good for you. Santa Susanna is a nightmare.
It
Awful. Kevin, do you have any further news on other nukes? I mean, is there other breaking news on other reactors sinking into the earth? Kevin, you there?
We're engaged in a zombie reactor fight at Palisades in Michigan. It closed in May of 2022. Holtec took it over under false pretenses, saying they were going to decommission it. What they are doing is trying to restart it. They are illegally using the decommissioning trust fund monies on the restart scheme. So we have demanded Inspector General and Office of Investigations at NRC to look into this illegal use of the decommissioning trust fund at Palisades. They also, in addition to starting up a very risky 50-plus-year-old reactor, they also want to build multiple small modular reactors at the Palisades site. So yeah, Holtec is evil. They are criminal, including in Ukraine, where they just struck a deal with the Ukrainian government to build up to 20 SMRs in a war zone. So we're fighting them in New Mexico, we're fighting them in Michigan. We need to fight them in Ukraine. Wherever Holtec goes, we need to fight them.
Well, I'll tell you, man, Ukraine, they just lost a ton of support. I mean, how lunatic you have to be in the middle of a war when you're getting shelled and people are being killed left and right, and you have 15 large hostage reactors. Now you come out and you want to build more? I mean, these people are absolutely crazy. I mean, I would love to support Ukraine.
Holtec has had the radioactive waste management contract in Ukraine for years. So now they're into building new reactors. They're opening a new division.
Well, I believe Holtec is a New Jersey company. Am I right? But they're very close to.
Yeah, they came out of New Jersey, but they've got headquarters in Florida. You name it. They're global now, but they came out of Cherry Hill, New Jersey.
Right. Well, they have a very close relationship with Cory Booker. And so we really need to watch out for Cory Booker and Sheldon Whitehouse. I understand coming out of New Jersey that the chief executive officer of Holtec is named Don Corleone. Is that true? Sorry. Okay. There's an article in Counterpunch by Carol Woolman about Zaporizhia, which is still shut in. People are terrified now. How do they, with the horror show going on at Zaporizhia, how do you justify trying to build more atomic reactors? I mean, that's the definition of insanity. Okay, you guys, Sally G has her hand, and then we've been, there's still 40 of you, 39 of us with us after 2 hours and God knows how long. Kevin, is there anything else you want to bring up from Beyond Nuclear?
Just on the Zaporizhia point, NEIS Chicago Nuclear Energy Information Service has a group and individual sign-on letter, which essentially is calling for the US government to take security seriously at US atomic reactors. And what spurred it was US federal funding to the Ukraine government to enhance security at its reactors. So just calling the Biden administration on its bluff. And I can try to maybe put a link in the chat to that if I can find one.
Okay, that'd be great. Wonderful. We appreciate that. Put your link. This is Kevin Camps from Beyond Nuclear, one of the great campaigners of our movement over the decades, and done great work. And I mean, if the NRC does not take seriously this sinking at Davis-Besse, then, you know, having written them off many, many times, we just got to write them off one more time. I mean, this is clearly a tangible, immediate threat to the continued operation of this atomic reactor, that it's sinking, as you have mentioned. And, you know, they've already broken their own law, extending the license at Diablo Canyon, which is completely insane. And now you got this one falling into the ground, along with Vogtle. I mean, that's just amazing. Thank you, Kevin, for watchdogging that. Sally G, and I think we'll say goodbye. I want everybody to go out and listen to Tchaikovsky's Fifth Symphony.
Yeah, on Holtec, totally connected to the Democratic machine in New Jersey. Governor Murphy just signed a bill that gave the political party machines awesome powers. And I just put a link in the chat about George Norcross, who was the boss of Southern Jersey. He's a gangster. Yeah, so
aren't
yeah.
they all? Okay, anybody else want to chime in before we'll be back again next week. Jerry Ashton was wonderful in our first hour. Thank you, Charlie, and so many others. As I said, on May 29th or 30th, I can't remember which one it is, we will have Marianne Williamson on with us. We're working on Dennis Kucinich and Bobby Kennedy, so we'll see how that goes. Justin, Jeffrey, and then Justin. Jeffrey, go ahead, please, and then Justin.
You know, one of the things we were supposed to talk about was about the let me get that.
What?
The Montana's exiling a trans state legislator.
Yes, and apparently the governor of Montana has just signed an anti-trans bill after his son asked him not to.
And get this. Did you know there was a LGBTQ persecution in the United States? So it's called The Lavender Scare. And you could see this documentary, which I'm going to share for you in the chat box. Oh, and one last thing, a personal thing. We should have a personal meeting so we could discuss about this, if you know what I mean.
Another time. Thank you, Jeffrey, for that. I want to point out as a historian that the Red Scare of the 1940s and 50s with Joe McCarthy was actually also an anti-gay thing. It's actually the Red Lavender Scare. And they really went after gays, which is hugely ironic because Joe McCarthy's chief legal guy was Roy Cohn, who was Donald Trump's godfather and who was as gay as they came. And he was in the closet all through the Red Scare, even though he was gay. And when his mother died, Roy Cohn, he went out very publicly and was seen with all sorts of very handsome young men, and then finally died of AIDS. And Roy Cohn had personally helped raise Donald Trump. And when he came with AIDS, Donald just cut him right off. Wouldn't see him again, wouldn't acknowledge him, even though he'd been raised by him. And Roy Cohn's last words about Donald Trump was that, quote, this is a direct quote, Donald Trump pisses ice water. That's what he had to say about Donald Trump, the kid he raised. But, you know, in all fairness, Roy Cohn was just as vile and vicious as Donald Trump. Justin and then Wendy. Justin again, and And then Wendy, I got you, I guess you're muted. Wendy, you're not, but there we go. Justin, go ahead.
Since we're talking about various kinds of passionate issues to bring out and motivate the base, I'm wondering, you talked about raising, raising a community in terms of public housing. Do we have any advocates on deck for any things like that?
I don't know. I just saw Lori Lightfoot, the outgoing mayor of Chicago, saying that, the housing situation for homeless in Chicago is a nightmare, catastrophe. So good point. Good question. We'll have more on that. We'll have Joel Siegel back on to talk about homelessness. That will be a good return. Wendy, and then Mary, and anybody else, please raise your hand now because it's pretty much time to go. Wendy, go ahead, and then Mary.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I definitely appreciate the homelessness issue. Just one quick thing I forgot when I was talking about Georgia is LaShawn Thompson, who is held in pretrial detention in Fulton County, which is right next to DeKalb, where they're building Cop City. And LaShawn Thompson is 35 years old. He was arrested, couldn't make $2,500 bail, and he was therefore eaten by bugs alive till he wasn't alive anymore because the conditions at Fulton County prison are so bad. And so there's a lot of calls for Fulton County to be shut down, but just the epidemic that we're facing, I'd like to maybe cover that more. Just pretrial detention, it goes beyond any like innocent till proven guilty. There's so many people, like it was mentioned earlier, somebody was arrested, one of the forest defenders, they lost their job. They couldn't make it to work because they couldn't make bail. I mean, the cash bail system is just criminal in itself. I think it's a major part of justice reform. But yeah, LaShawn Thompson was eaten alive by bed bugs in Fulton County Prison, and they're building a Cop City next to it. And Colin Kaepernick is funding the investigation because the government is too inept, incompetent, and corrupt to do it themselves. So thank you.
Thank you, Wendy, and our condolences and memories to him. Thank you again, Kevin Camps, for coming on. We always appreciate your presence and keep us posted. And let's get Davis Bessie shut, for God's sakes. Okay, Mary, and then Dorothy Reich. Mary Butler, and then Dorothy Reich.
Yeah, when we brought up the housing issue, what do we do about housing issues? So many people are taking into account that it easily 20% to 35% of business buildings and residential housing is empty, either because of foreclosures or other things. And there's no reason, or landlords that are trying to make money off of allowing a property to slowly be condemned and then turning a profit on it for their loss and then making big money by having a sister company buy the property and then build freaking a nice building. This happens, that's how Trump made all his money. But needless to say, what I'm trying to say is if we came up with a city ordinance that says any structure that could be occupied by a human being that's been vacant for more than 5 years and has not had its upkeep is automatically can be petitioned by the city, state, or county for neglect to take over the occupancy instead of it being eminent domain. It is neglect and abuse of said property.
Okay.
And we could do that also with slumlords to get the slumlords out of that business. If they haven't met the standards of what a proper housing is within 5 years of owning said property,
okay,
the city would take it over and then use that to give out to putting citizens in for temporary housing, let alone the fact after them using it for 5 years, they could put it up for auction at a reasonable price for low-income people.
Mary. Thank you for that. I want to point out also, many people know that there's a huge glut of commercial real estate space now. They're actually tearing down, Ron Leonard is, they're tearing down a lot of the big box stores in shopping centers and malls that could conceivably be converted to housing. Lord and Taylor among them. Okay, Dorothy, you get the last word. Dorothy Reich.
You know, anybody who knows me knows I've been working on bail for decades, and we almost got a bill through, and then the dog, the whatever bail bondsman, killed it. It's really tough because the bail bonds people are backed by the big banks. You're not dealing with a bail bondsman, you're dealing with Wells Fargo. So,
okay.
Oh, wait a minute. That wasn't what I wanted to talk about. I want to just mention another outrage in the criminal justice system, and that is plea bargains, where people are pleading guilty to offenses they did not commit because they can't afford to stay in jail and miss their jobs, and they wind up having a record, and they haven't even done anything. I was listening to a podcast from Jen Taub about it, and I was looking for the name of the woman who wrote the book. But for example, this guy got picked up in his own apartment building for trespassing. And the lawyer said, you can plead not guilty and you can come back in a day or something and you bring your ID. And he said, I can't because I have to go to work. So he pled guilty to trespassing in his own apartment building so he wouldn't miss work. And now he's got a record. And this goes on all the time. Our courts are not set up to work with the number of cases they have. So people are forced to plea bargain, or they're threatened by the judges if you don't take this plea bargain, or by the DAs that they're gonna really fix you if you insist on going to trial. You're gonna be sorry.
Okay, thank you, Dorothy. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Kevin, everybody, and Georgie. Good to see you, Ron Leonard. Everybody, it's another amazing week. We'll be back next week. Greg Palast will be with us next week, live and in person. One of the great reporters in all of American history. He's got a lot to tell us, Greg Palast, and we will see everybody next week. Have a great one.
Hey, wait, before we sign off, can I mention one
Very
thing?
quickly, Jeffrey, one last thing, not personal.
I know a lot. I said a lot of. I know I was going to say a
Just
lot of
go
stuff,
for
but
it.
I just put it in the chat box. So take a look. Make sure you save the chat box so you could take a look at it. Then reply. Then give your thoughts about it if you need to.
All right,
Thank you.
Jeffrey. Thank you. We appreciate you, everybody. Paul Newman, all you great folks. Wendy, Tatanka, again. Tchaikovsky's Fifth Symphony. Have a nice, intimate week, and we'll talk to you next week. No nukes, everybody.
The Orgasm Symphony, is that what you're talking about?
That's the new. That's the new name of the Tchaikovsky. He would have approved, by the way. Tchaikovsky was gay, for those of you who are interested, and it actually cost him his life. Anybody want to talk about that next week? We can. I love Tchaikovsky, and I'm not surprised it was his Fifth Symphony that caused it. So thank you, everybody. Maybe we can get Springsteen to play it at his next concert.
There you go. Bruce. No
Take
nukes.
care, everybody, and thank you, Jeffrey, for your contributions. We appreciate it.
Happy May Day.
Happy May Day, everybody. Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Good
Thank
call,
you so
Jeffrey.
much. I'm gonna shut it down. I actually have a progressive caucus vote happening. And Harvey, I just thought of it, that the guy Jerry from earlier with the healthcare thing, I would love to connect Carolina with him with the progressive caucus here and her work with healthcare as an act of love and the Medicaid ballot initiative in Florida. It would be really great to just link them if possible.
He's not hard to find. So email me out and her, and we'll put you all together.
Thank you so much.
He's the
Good
guy.
call.
Hold up. All right, all you guys. Thank you so much. We'll see you next week. No nukes.
No nukes. Thanks, guys.